Well, welcome everyone to another candidate interview. I'm Diane Middleton with the Midland Business Alliance, and we're really pleased to bring you these interviews as we head into the 2024 general election. The Midland Business Alliance feels it's important that you get to know the candidates from the business and economic development standpoint. So that's the purpose for these interviews. We're conducting a number of them. This morning, joining me, we have Rodney Cloa and Diane Bristol, both very active members of the MBA's Business Advocacy Council. And we are interviewing Congressman John Moolenaar. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good to be with you this.
Thank you. Thank you. He is running for re-election to the 2nd Congressional District here in Michigan. So let's dig right in and get into our interview. And Diane, I think you have the first question for Congressman this morning.
I do. Good morning, John. In 3 minutes or less, please outline your platform, why you're running, and what qualifications you possess as a policymaker.
Well, thank you for the question. And, right now, as I travel around the 2nd Congressional District, it's 20 counties and a large geographic area. And the common themes are people want to see an end to this inflation that's driving up the costs for groceries, gas, different heating their homes, all of the above. And that's kind of the number one priority. Number two, people want to see a secure border. It's not acceptable to have 10 million people in the last 3.5 years come across our border illegally. We don't even know who those people are. Some of them have been on the terrorist watch list. Some are bringing in fentanyl, which is killing 100,000 Americans a year. And so that's another key priority. My background is I was born and raised in the Midland community, went to the public schools in Midland, had a chance to serve both in local government, in the Midland City Council, as well as in state government, and represented the mid-Michigan area, both in the State House and the State Senate. Now I've served, this is my 5th term in Congress, and I'm asking the voters for another term. And I believe our work is continuing. Our work is just beginning to face the threats that we face with a growing and more threatening China, and the world that's getting, it seems, crazier by the day. And so those are the qualifications I hope to bring to office. I've spent time in the Midland community in business development. I originally started as a chemist. I've also been a school administrator. So I feel that I know the community, know the issues facing our state and our country, and I want to put all my skills to work to serve the people of the 2nd District.
Hey, thank you so much. Rod, you have the next question.
Yeah, good morning, John.
Good morning, Rod.
What are the most pressing issues at the federal level of government?
Well, right now, as I mentioned, we're hearing about inflation, a border that's porous and bringing, drugs and human trafficking and all sorts of crime, but also energy policy. That's a key area for our country. We have a strong ability to be self-sufficient in our energy, and I think we need to explore that. Makes us less dependent on other countries and actually makes it more competitive for jobs and growth. The Biden administration has taken the opposite approach and is actually forcing our automotive companies and other manufacturers to play on China's home field. And that's getting increasingly challenging when you're considering the raw materials and the supply chain dominance that China has in some of these areas. So, in my view, we ought to promote energy independence, which would keep our costs down here in Michigan, but also make sure that we're strategic in making sure that we get our supply chains here in the United States or with allies that we can rely on. And to me, that's the pathway to grow manufacturing and jobs in Michigan and the United States.
All right, thank you. John, I have the next question for you. What is your experience in the business community?
Well, I worked as a chemist at Dow. worked in business development at Dow. Also have worked with Middle Michigan Development Corporation, growing jobs in the region with small business. I also had an independent contracting business for business development, and also worked with MyTech Plus, which promoted interest in our schools and our students growing into the skilled trades and career and technical education. Very proud of that work, and I believe that it helped Mid-Michigan grow at a very important time.
Thank you. Diane, you have the next question.
John, what steps will you take to support small business and encourage job creation?
Well, right now we need to make sure we extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That to me is key going into this next Congress. We have to have the pay-fors, and I believe a lot of the pay-fors, which included targeted subsidies and others through whether it was the Inflation Reduction Act or the infrastructure bill, those have not come to fruition in the way that people had promised. And I believe that the goal should be lowering regulation, increasing our tax policy that benefits job growth, and getting rid of some of these mandates, whether it's the EV mandate or the mandate where Department of Labor is raising costs on Michigan farmers to the point where 4th and 5th generation farms are saying they can't make it going forward. And so these are self-inflicted wounds from government regulatory policy, and that needs to change.
All right. Rod, you have the next question.
John, what groups have endorsed your candidacy?
Well, Farm Bureau, other business groups, when it comes to, manufacturing, the Detroit Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of Commerce groups, small businesses across the state, Farm Bureau, Right to Life. We have a host of businesses that have, been, supporting my efforts to push back against China. And quite frankly, I can't remember all the different associations, but I can tell you it's a very strong collection of job providers, farm groups, Michigan agribusiness groups, and rank and file people who are struggling to make it in this economy.
All right. Thank you. That's fair. That's fair. John, if you are reelected, what will be your approach to the federal budget? And then what is your general philosophy on spending and taxation?
Well, I think it's important that we look at what we can control in our spending, and that's through the appropriations process. That's about 1/3 of the federal spending. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. We actually reported out bills, 12 bills out of our committee. And unfortunately, we only got about 70% of that spending across the finish line across the House before it didn't have the support to get enacted into law. My goal would be to do all of the discretionary spending across the finish line and make sure we have oversight and accountability for our federal spending. That's called regular order, where you have 12 bills and then the Senate has 12 bills and we negotiate at the end. It's similar to what I did in the state legislature. That process is broken down on the federal level. When it comes to the 2/3, which is non-discretionary, which is on autopilot, if you will, when it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt, these are all areas that we don't have a role in appropriations. They're based on a formula. And in my view, what we need to do is make reforms that sustain those programs, especially for those nearing retirement, as well as those who are retirees, but make sure reform them in a way that they'll be there for future generations. And to me, that's going to be the bigger challenge, and it needs to be done in a bipartisan way to get a handle on this spending that we're doing. Our tax policy needs to encourage job growth. That will also help with bringing in revenues for our country's government. And to me, a pro-growth strategy makes the most sense.
All right. Well, believe it or not, that is the end of our interview. So, Congressman, we thank you for your time and for offering this glimpse into your candidacy for re-election. And we wish you a good day. Thank you so much. And viewers, you are welcome. Viewers, stay tuned for the next candidate interview. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diane Middleton with the Midland Business Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you to another candidate interview. We have been interviewing the candidates as we head into the 2024 general election so that you, the viewer, can get to know them through the lens of business and economic development. And because of our organizational mission, we think that's critical that you know that side of the candidates. So joining me here for this interview, we have Rob Musselman and Rod Kloa. Both of these gentlemen are active volunteers on the MBA's Business Advocacy Council. And this afternoon, we are interviewing Michael Lynch, who is running to represent the constituents of the 2nd Congressional District here in Michigan. So welcome, Mr. Lynch. We're very glad to have you this afternoon, and let's get right into it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
You're welcome. All right, let's go ahead with the first question.
In 3 minutes or less, outline your platform, why you are running, and what qualifications you pose for policymaker.
Okay, well, my platform really breaks down to 3 things, and that is families, farms, and freedom. Families, including things like access to healthcare, particularly in rural areas. Those that know the 2nd Congressional District know that it's primarily rural areas. In the nature of farms, helping farmers to get better pay for their produce and for their livestock. Right now, there's a very limited number of corporations that control the agricultural sector, and I'd like to see more competition in that area. And when I talk about freedom, I'm talking about the freedom of women to have access to all forms of healthcare, talking about the freedom to vote, and there not be restrictions or anything to get in the way of a wide variety of people voting. Getting back to families, I believe in the strength of the public schools. I believe it was Horace Mann that said that public education is the great equalizer of the conditions of men, and very often a group that does not have access to good education cannot have a lapse in both the ability to get gainful employment and also limited earnings over their lifetime, as well as problems with healthcare, among other things.
All right. Well, thank you for that insight. I have the second question. What do you believe are the most pressing issues at the federal level of government?
Well, people ask me, what is the first thing that I'm going to work on? And the first thing I'm going to work on is going to be helping out active duty personnel, military personnel, and also veterans. My father was a career Air Force officer. My mother was a Marine. And so I'm very much in touch with the life and lifestyle of people like myself who grew up on Air Force bases, and also the plight of those who enter the military for whatever reason and need to transition into civilian life. I'm already working with a retired colonel in DC to help work on those kinds of things. Right now, the suicide rate amongst active duty personnel is far too high. And very often the living conditions, particularly for sailors, is below standards. I believe that we need to bring more entrepreneurial opportunity to communities. I think that small business is really the heart of the economy, and entrepreneurial opportunities not only employs more people than small business employs more people than anybody else, but it's also where you get innovation and some of the best ideas coming up. I think we need to manage properly our immigration policies. We're going to need 1 million immigrants to maintain a year to maintain our economy, and 3 million immigrants per year to grow our economy. So that's very important. Right now in the rural areas, there is a lack of access to healthcare. One of the counties that makes up the 2nd Congressional District does not even have an OBGYN. So a woman trying to get prenatal health services has to go outside of her county to get those kind of things. So really those are what I see as some of the biggest issues that we're facing right now.
All right, thank you so much for that. Rod, you have the third question.
What is your experience with and in the business community?
Well, I have an undergraduate degree in economics. I have an MBA from Louisiana State University, and I have a PhD in management, hospitality management from Iowa State University. I've worked as a business developer, primarily in the hospitality sector since I was in my early 20s. What that meant was first opening up restaurants for, well, what used to be General Mills restaurants, which is now Darden, among others. And I would go city to city to do the legwork to make sure that that all the city rules and regulations were followed, and to introduce our restaurants. Eventually, that became a job with Shoney's. Eventually, that became a job with Holiday Inn, and that became a job with Harrah's Casinos. As the casino industry grew, I would go into the community before the casinos did and do things like set up banking relationships, set up relationships with the Chamber of Commerce, set up job fairs, etc. And currently, I work in business development for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe of Michigan here in Mount Pleasant, trying to maximize the revenue that comes from their current business operations, but also to identify opportunities that might be out there. I've worked in government relations starting when I was 17 years old with the Seminole tribe of Florida. By the way, I'm 0% Native American. All 4 of my grandparents got off a boat from Ireland, but started to create opportunities again for that tribe, and just kind of grew my career. Again, just working in, again, primarily hospitality industry, building opportunities and working directly with, all sorts of people, be it extension agents or community leaders or whatever, to try to bring businesses to the areas.
All right, thank you so much. Rob, you have the next question.
Wonderful. What steps will you take to support small businesses and encourage job creation in our state?
Absolutely. Not only do I like what Kamala Harris has said about an opportunity economy, I really think that it's about opportunity. It's about making sure that everybody, regardless of their background, regardless of ethnic, religious, whatever, has the opportunity to take advantage of programs and is not. There is no redlining. There is no, discrimination based on anything about gender or whatever. I like the idea of the tax incentives for small business. I also like the idea of properly taxing large corporations. I think that really, although the large corporations are important, and they certainly are likewise important to bring large business opportunities. For example, in Mecosta County right now, there's the opportunity to open up a plant that will hire 2,200 people with very good paying jobs. But, I think that taking care of tax incentives and strengthening the Small Business Administration, For example, in right after COVID, there was the opportunity to pass the Restaurant Revitalization Act, and I would have definitely have supported that because, again, having a career in hospitality, I understand what particularly small mom and pop restaurant owners go through, as well as understanding, what small business owners go through, be it a doctor's office, a lawyer's office, an insurance office, even a car dealership. And some of the challenges they have. I'd like to try to work on removing whatever barriers there might happen to be to business. In the governmental world, I understand that sometimes regulations can get a little bit onerous and unnecessary. And I'd like to see those mitigated as much as possible to just, make business as easy to contract, to do as possible.
All right, thank you. I have the next question. Michael, can you tell us what groups have endorsed your candidacy?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Starting with AFL-CIO, United Auto Workers, Teamsters, also a group. I mean, I don't have I wish I would have printed the list in front of me because it's a very long list and very diversified. There is a Mothers for Action is one of the groups. They believe in proper gun laws and gun laws that not doing away with guns by any stretch of imagination, but having proper gun laws to protect their children. Free Thought organization. It's kind of ironic that I've been endorsed not only by a group that is freedom from religion, but I've also been endorsed by some groups that are freedom of religion and are Christian Judeo-Christian in nature. Like I said, there's a handful of others, but that's kind of where they kind of fall.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Rod, I think you have the last question for our candidate today.
Okay, Michael. If elected, what will be your approach to the federal budget? With a follow-up of what is your general philosophy on spending and taxation?
Well, I don't believe that the middle class needs to be taxed anymore. I see that with job growth and with opportunity growth, that taxes will grow from that sector if they're given the opportunity and if that sector is given the opportunity to grow. Ironically, Dwight D. Eisenhower said that every missile launched was a meal out of a child's mouth. And this was a Republican 5-star general who said that we've got to be smart about military spending. And again, having grown up around the military, I actually kind of say that I served in the military as a child, because trust me, if you're an officer's son, you're serving. But like I said, I think that taxation needs to be fair. I think we need to look closely at the way that certain forms of income are handled by certain members of the population, particularly at the very highest end, the 1% to 5%. I think corporate taxes don't need to be increased, particularly anything that is an S corp or a C corp, or in that sector. I think that you need to, I think you hear a lot of people that kind of complain about taxes and things like that. And the example I make is if you're getting good value for your dollar, then you're probably not going to complain. And I think that's the biggest issue, is that the citizenry doesn't feel like they're always getting good value for dollar. They look around and they see things that might look wasteful, that might look silly. So I think bringing the idea of not only bringing good value for dollar, but communicating that effectively with your constituency and letting them know where the money is going and where the money is coming from. I'm not a big tax and spend kind of guy. I think that I've worked with very, very small budgets in my professional life, and I've worked with some very, very huge budgets. worked with the entire marketing budget for Harrah's Casinos. And I can tell you that's a pretty good sized budget. So again, I don't think we need to be taxed to death. I don't think taxes need to go up. I think that we can, that the world can run effective. Well, we can run it. The country can run effective on the taxes at the level where they are. But I think taxes again need to be fair. And I think a big part of that is that no matter what your level, if you see a certain level of fairness, then things don't hurt quite so much. But to have somebody in authority say that they don't pay taxes because they're smart is offensive on a lot of different levels, not the least of which is you're kind of telling me, oh, I pay taxes and I'm not smart. So I think really bringing value for money to the constituents and let them know what value they're receiving. In the 2nd Congressional District, you have 4 of the 5 most impoverished counties in the state of Michigan. And we need to bring opportunities, we need to bring tax dollars, and we need to bring business to the 2nd Congressional District. As I tell people, you drive through my district, you're going to see a lot more corn than people. But so we need to take care of the people we have, and we need to really focus on what the needs of those people are. And again, one of the primary needs is the access to healthcare, housing, childcare, and I do think that tax dollars should be going into those areas.
All right. Well, that concludes our interview for today. I'd like to thank our candidate for his time and you're welcome. You're welcome. And also my volunteers, Rob and Rod, for helping me to interview Mr. Lynch this afternoon. So thank you, viewers, for tuning in, and be sure to watch our next candidate interview. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our candidate interview. I'm Diane Middleton with the Midland Business Alliance, and we're pleased to bring you these candidate interviews as we head into the general election. We are interviewing candidates, trying to learn a little bit about their business perspective, their views on economic development. We think that's important as you make those decisions before you vote. So joining me here for this interview, we have 2 members of our Business Advocacy Council. We have Rodney Kloa and Rob Musselman. And today, we are interviewing State Senator Kristen McDonald Rivet. Good afternoon, Senator.
Hi there.
And she is running, although she's current state senator, she is now running to represent the constituents of the 8th Congressional District here in Michigan. So again, welcome, Senator. And without further delay, we're going to get right into our questions. So the first one, Senator, in 3 minutes or less, outline your platform, why you're running, and what qualifications you possess for this role.
Okay, that's a lot for 3 minutes. So let me just say that it's been a privilege of a lifetime to be able to represent the Midland community in the state Senate. I have been really connected to Midland as the CEO of the Greater Midland Community Centers and a longtime friend and member of the Midland Business Alliance, working very closely with you all on the Working Families Tax Credit, which I introduced was the very first thing that I did when I went into the Senate, $500 million tax cut for families that are making less than $60,000 a year. I've told you all many times that I think we need to urgently and with discipline move forward in putting more dollars in people's pockets and raising our median income across the state, raising our population across the state. 60% of our jobs pay less than $50,000 a year. So that's why that tax cut was incredibly important. In the state Senate, I worked to introduce legislation to cap the cost of prescription drugs, to be able to lower the cost of housing. I've got a package that I've introduced that will help lower the cost of childcare for our families. The reality is people in our district are really very much struggling. As the mom of 6 kids, I know what it's like to worry about a grocery bill. And I'm running for Congress because I think that it's important that we have pragmatic leaders who know how to build coalitions and know how to actually roll up their sleeves and get something done. It's why I've been endorsed by the Saginaw Chamber, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and was the Small Business Association Legislator of the Year. I am pragmatic, I'm a problem solver, and I am very committed to representing Mid-Michigan and working families in Washington.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Rod, I think you have the next question.
What are the most pressing issues at the federal level of government, in your opinion?
Again, very big question. I just want to tell you that, you know, for me, the very first thing that I think is possible to get done is reinstate the expansion of the child tax credit, which brought millions of children out of poverty and put money immediately back in the pockets of families that are struggling with the costs that we are dealing with right now, from groceries to gas to housing. All of those things are really difficult for most people in our region, but most especially hard for working families. So being able to get that done is really important. I would say that if you ask me the most pressing thing in Congress, of course, there are things happening internationally that are of big concern. There are things happening across the country of big concern. But to me, the existential crisis in Congress is the extremism happening on both sides, the bickering, name pointing, and a general feel that it is more important to go viral on social media as a member of Congress than it is to actually take solutions across the finish line. So I think that we have an issue in our politics in general, and we now are looking at the least effective Congress in modern history as they struggle to maintain leadership and struggle to reach any sort of bipartisan compromise on the real issues facing day-to-day families. And so, you know, it's a bigger thing to solve, but I think that we do it one person at a time, one candidate at a time, and really start to reject the political messaging of division and hate and fear-mongering, and talk about practical solutions that have a chance at strengthening families and boosting our economy.
All right. Thank you. Rob, you have the next question?
I do. What is your experience in the business community?
I have quite a bit of experience in the business community. So I have owned my own small business, ran Greater Midland, which, although is a nonprofit, is a very sophisticated and complex organization with an annual budget of over $13 million and 500 staff members. I know what it's like to actually worry about the rising cost of benefits and keeping payroll solid so that your employees are getting a check every day. And then have done a lot of great work alongside the business community throughout my career and while I was in the legislature. As I mentioned before, I was the Small Business Association Legislator of the Year, but have also worked very closely with chambers across the state, including all of the chambers in this district, as well as the State Chamber of Commerce and the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Association, the Michigan Manufacturing Association. These are organizations that are representing our employers, and I work very closely with them, both publicly and behind the scenes, to make sure that we have legislation that works for our employers.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Senator, this next question, I think you've started to answer it, but I will give you the opportunity to elaborate. What steps would you take at the federal level to support small businesses and encourage more job creation?
Yeah. So in terms of job creation, I think you can look to my record in the state legislature. I've actually have a very strong record. I sit on the Economic Development Committee, as well as the vice chair of the Labor and Economic Development budget, which includes the MEDC. We know that employers need help in all kinds of ways. So from a big business standpoint, the importance of economic incentives, like you saw with our Corning project, the Hemlock Semiconductor, the project that's moving that will help the research and development of Dow. Those are projects that have been priorities of mine, and I really played a big role in getting them across the finish line. But it's also on the other side that I hear from our smaller businesses that are having very real issues with being able to maintain a workforce that is consistent and allows them, for instance, with our restaurants, to being able to have fully staffed crews on the floor, those sorts of things. A lot of the turnover, a lot of the worker shortage has to do with the inability, transportation issues in the workforce. It has to do with the inability to find childcare, which is at a crisis level here in Michigan. So I think we have to both economically support the support and expansion of existing employers and bringing in new jobs with the big things that we talk about with the SOAR projects, and the federal government can play a big role in that, such as we saw with the CHIPS Act. But we also have to make big investments in our people and in our workforce. And those things are always pictured politically as separate things, but in fact, they are very much need to come together so that we are investing at the people and at the business level at the same time, with this eye again of we have to raise our median income. It's really, really important for the sustainability of our region. And that's, that's where I stand in terms of business support. But I also am very concerned with the amount of, I think that we have to look very carefully at the amount of red tape that is in front of our businesses, particularly our small businesses, that make it very difficult for them to operate on a day-to-day basis. And if it isn't about safety, health and safety, then we need to take a really good hard look at what it is we're requiring our businesses to do.
All right. Thank you so much. Rod, you have the next question.
And another one, I think you already answered some, but you can elaborate some more on too. But what groups have endorsed your candidacy?
Oh gosh, a lot of them. But let me just start. So I was very proud to get the Saginaw Chamber of Commerce, the Detroit Chamber of Commerce. I have been I've been very proud to. We're announcing this week, but the Fraternal Order of Police have endorsed us. We also have the endorsement of multiple labor organizations. I actually would just invite people to go to our website at KristenMcDonaldRivet.com. We have almost 60 organizational and individual endorsements, and most of them came very early. I have a very strong reputation of working to get big things done. I don't bring a lot of political drama. I don't do name calling. I don't do the kinds of things I would lecture my kids about doing, right? I just have a strong record of being able to accomplish big things, and generally I work behind the scenes to get that done, which is why we have seen incredible support from the moment we announced this campaign. I'm very proud of the number of endorsements that I have.
All right, thank you. And Rob, I believe you have the final question for the senator.
If elected, what will your approach to the federal budget, and what is your general philosophy on spending and taxation?
Also, that's like an hour-long answer, but
Yeah, sorry.
that's all right. I think you can see my approach from a taxation standpoint. I'll kind of work it back, but I do think, and again, that there's no one in the world who doesn't think that the federal budget is out of control, and we have to manage our federal budget in a way that recognizes that we're talking about American tax dollars. From a taxing perspective, I believe that our tax code needs to reflect our values. And here in Michigan, our values are that we have a lot of working people who are unable to make ends meet. So if we're talking about tax relief, if we're talking about protecting Social Security, when we're talking about any of these pieces, it's really important that the majority of people are where we see families, again, 60% of our jobs pay less than $50,000 a year. That's not a political talking point. It's a data point from the Department of Labor. So it's why the first thing I did was introduce the Working Families Tax Credit. We have to incentivize work. We have to get more money in people's pockets. and I will oppose any effort to cut Social Security. There are too many seniors in our district that are going back to work. I talk to seniors all the time who are grabbing a job as the greeter at Walmart or the drive-through at McDonald's because they can't make ends meet. So that's where you'll see my priority when it comes to taxes and priorities in the federal budget should be investing in our people and keeping our country safe.
Right. Well, I think that concludes our interview. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, Rob and Rod, for joining me and helping me to conduct this interview. And thank you to our viewers as well for your interest and taking the time to be informed. And stay tuned for our next candidate interview. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another candidate interview. I'm Diane Middleton with the Midland Business Alliance. We have been recording and bringing you these interviews in advance of the 2024 general election because we think it's important that you have the chance to get to know the candidates from a business and economic development standpoint. So that's why we're bringing these to you, and we have another one. And here with me this morning, we have Diane Bristol. She is a member of the MBA Board of Directors and also the Business Advocacy Council. And we are interviewing Paul Junge, who is running for election to the 8th Congressional District seat here in Michigan. So good morning, Paul. How are you?
Diane, good to see you this morning. Diane, good to see you as well. Looking forward to our conversation.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. Diane, you have a question for Paul.
I do. Paul, in 3 minutes or less, would you outline your platform, why you're running, and what qualifications you have as a policyholder?
Well, Diane, I'm running to be our representative in Michigan's 8th Congressional District for reasons really focused on what the people in this district want to see, what kind of representation they want in Washington, D.C. I've been campaigning for many months now throughout the district, Genesee County, Saginaw County, Bay County, and here in Midland. And what I'm hearing from voters is a feeling that the economy is just not working for them. It's not working for working families. There's a concern that we don't live in communities that are safe, that we have an open southern border that is bringing across drugs, that we're seeing human trafficking, that we're seeing really all kinds of different impacts that are negative in our communities, and they want to see change. And so I'm running to be that representative in Washington, to be a voice in Washington on those issues and the issues that matter here in Michigan's 8th District. Diane, you mentioned that the Midland Business Alliance in particular wanted to focus a little bit on kind of your economic background. And so I want to lead with my background that directly relates to that. And that is, I worked in my family business. My dad built a business that maintained military family housing. So we would take care of the homes and the families of the people that were protecting us around the world. And we would hire plumbers and carpenters and electricians, and we do the grounds work and clean the units, and important work to support those families. And when you run a business, you start to know the challenges that employees face, how they're trying to earn a living. The problems that are involved with working with subcontractors and suppliers, and how to deal with taxes and how to deal with regulation. So I've got that experience as someone who has been a job creator and serving the community in a business sense. And I just think that is important for anyone who is running for office. I'm also a former criminal prosecutor. I worked in the domestic violence unit, so I know about the importance of supporting police, the importance of protecting the most vulnerable in our community. And also part of my professional background is I did work in the Trump administration in the Department of Homeland Security, specifically in the United States USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Service, where we worked on securing the border. We worked on providing work visas for folks that needed to work in various different industries. So I've got some familiarity with those issues, some familiarity with how things work in Washington. So I think I bring a professional background that will be useful. And, Diane, to kind of come back to what you asked, Why am I running? I just want to emphasize again, it's because I think the people in this district want a common sense approach to solving problems that they see in this community that they just don't feel that have been addressed. And that's what I'm running to do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Paul, could you explain for our viewers, what do you see as the most pressing issues at the federal level?
Well, Diane, I probably alluded to this a little bit in the previous question in terms of why I'm running. Look, one of the most pressing issues I hear every day when I'm out campaigning from people is a feeling that the American dream, which they felt as they grew up was attainable and something that was part of the fabric of this community, is becoming increasingly unattainable, particularly around the issue of affordability of everything. Being able to afford groceries, being able to afford rent or mortgage payments, being able to afford insurance, just across the board, that things have gotten too expensive, that a paycheck for a working family doesn't cover the expenses. And so you ask, what can we do at the federal level? Well, part of the direct problem that was driving inflation was what this Congress did and what this current administration, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, did in passing what they called the Inflation Reduction Act, which really was a big spur to increasing inflation. The size of the federal government, the spending of federal government, the debt that we have now is just a tremendous problem. I mean, the federal debt is so big now that the interest payment on that debt begins to crowd out all other spending. And so one of the principal issues related to what I hear from voters in this district about affordability and an economy that works is addressing the growth and just the oversize of the federal government. And so that will be a one key issue. You know, another key issue is going to be, and this is uniquely a federal government responsibility, is securing our southern border. I mean, I sometimes get asked, gee, Paul, Michigan is not a border state. And I quickly remind them, well, no, that's not true. We have a border with Canada. But we also do, the problems that come across a lawless southern border affects the entire country, whether it's fentanyl flooding our communities, whether it's the human trafficking that can include sex trafficking, can include bringing people to work illegally, and not just here, but throughout the country. Those problems permeate everywhere. And it is uniquely the federal government's responsibility to work on those issues. It has been a failure of the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration on those issues. My background, having worked in the Trump administration on those issues, I think helps me be more ready from day one to be proactive and effective on that issue. So those are at least two of the issues, broadly speaking, the economy and the affordability and securing the southern border, that'll be priorities should I go to Washington.
All right, thank you so much. Diane, you have a question for Paul?
Paul, you've kind of hit on this a little bit, but what is your experience in the business community?
Well, Diane, you know, I've already talked a little bit about having worked in my family business, and I do think that really makes a difference. I think that for candidates or for elected officials whose life has always been in nonprofits or just in government, there isn't an appreciation for, you know, what it's like where the rubber meets the road. And I think my experience in that will be helpful. You know, I think also I've had a great number of different parts to my background, not just helping to run my family business, but I've worked in business advocacy organizations. I have worked in government. I have worked in the public safety sector. And so I think all of those experiences will help me actively advocate for our members. And I think, you know, I think one thing that's worth pointing out is what an elected official is asked to do covers a wide array of issues. And so no candidate, no elected official is going to know everything about any particular subject. And so it's going to be important that we have an elected representative who will be actively reaching out to the community, who will be listening to people in the community and asking for their input on, hey, there's a piece of legislation. Does this piece of legislation make any sense? There are problems you're facing. Are there things we should be doing in government that we're not doing? As someone asking to be a member of the legislature, of course, the executive branch will be doing things, and there's an opportunity for oversight. And I did work as an investigative counsel for Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, doing oversight work. So there's all kinds of different ways an elected official has to plug in with members of the community. And that is something that, as I've been campaigning, I know I'm effective doing, whether it's local elected officials at the township level, at the city level, at the county level, whether it's business owners. I've met with firefighters, teachers, people from all walks of life. And that is something that will continue to happen should I be elected, is working with members of the community and being their voice in Washington.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Paul, if you are elected in November, can you outline what steps you would take to support small business and encourage job creation throughout the country?
Well, I get asked from time to time, Paul, what committees might you like to serve on should you get elected? And I think that's a dynamic process, but the Small Business Committee is one that I thought I would like to participate in. So that would be one step that I would like to take to try to promote small business. I think broadly speaking, not just promoting small business, but supporting an economy that's working for working families is what will be useful to small businesses. I mean, I'm very well aware that while it's important that we have big companies like Dow that we're very pleased to have here in Midland, that the biggest employer across the country is small business. And so when we talk about having a tax policy that works for businesses, that works for small business owners, that's not a question of some giveaways. That's a talk about helping to encourage people to grow businesses which provide employment opportunities and which provide services and goods in our community. So an all of the above energy policy, a tax policy that encourages growth and economic investment, a hard eye against regulation for regulations that are either unnecessary or counterproductive. All of these things will be important to create a dynamic and a pro-working family economy, which I think is also a pro-small business economy. And that will certainly be a focus should I be elected.
All right. Thank you so much.
Paul, can you give us the names of some of the people or companies or whatever that have endorsed you?
Well, I've been pleased to be endorsed by the Detroit News, just as an example, NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses. I've been endorsed by members of Congress, by local elected officials through all 4 counties in this district. It's been very positive to see the breadth of endorsements across the district, across the country, and really across different types of interest groups, if you will. One that might be slightly unique, I received the endorsement just the other day of the Republican Jewish Coalition. And I know that we haven't talked very much about international events, but when we see what's happening in Europe, when we see what's happening in the Middle East, when we see international tensions, it's easy for us to think, hey, that's happening far away, that will have no impact here. But it's important that the United States is as a leader in the world. And if we suddenly don't have shipping that's available, that's going to have an impact on all of us almost immediately. And so getting the endorsement of the RJC helps to demonstrate that I'm aware of those issues and that I'm going to be an advocate for America having a strong, positive role in the world, because it really does have an impact, not just domestically broadly, but right here in Michigan's 8th District.
All right. Thank you. Paul, if you're elected in November, what will be your approach to the federal budget, and what is your general philosophy on spending and taxation?
Well, look, I think broadly speaking, I think the question is who will make better use of your money? Will you make better use of it, or will the government make better use of it? And I think broadly speaking, the answer that almost all of us would give is we would make better use of our own money rather than government, whether it's an elected official or an unelected bureaucrat. So broadly speaking, I want to keep taxes low. I want to keep government spending in check. All that said, there's obviously some basic government functions and roles that have to be played, and we're going to make sure we get those things done. And we're going to prioritize serving Americans and people here in Michigan's 8th District. I mean, we're seeing the terrible devastation with Hurricane Helene, and we may get yet more terrible devastation for Milton as we're recording this now. I think Milton is about 36 hours from making landfall in Florida, and that may be terrible. And so that's an instance where government spending is absolutely needed to support all kinds of local efforts. So it's not just a purely, hey, it's up to you, you have to do your best. There is a role for government, whether it's funding public schools, which of course we support, whether it's securing the southern border, whether it's supporting the military. So we have to have a taxation system. We need to make it fair. We need to make it efficient. We may need to make it pro-growth, but we also need to make sure we keep it in check. And I might just share one piece of trivia I read just the other day. Of the 7 counties in this country that are the wealthiest, the highest income per capita, of those 7 highest income counties in this country, 5 of them are in and around Washington, D.C. That is indicative, I think, of the idea that we're sending tax revenues to Washington and they're getting stuck there. They're not coming back and serving people throughout the country, not serving people in Michigan's 8th District. So and I appreciate the question, Diane. It's important that the government has a role to play, and we need to have some taxes and we will have government spending, but we need to be very sharp in our looking at it, making sure it's effective, making sure it's not wasteful, and making sure it doesn't just go to some regions of the country and doesn't serve us here in Michigan's 8th District.
All right. Well, Paul, that is the conclusion of our interview, and we thank you for your time this morning and for the opportunity to take a look at your candidacy. Diane, thank you for helping me to conduct this conversation with Paul this morning. Viewers, thank you to you as well, and stay tuned for our next candidate interview.